Good morning. Today is Monday, March the 8th, and I welcome you back to our daily Lenten devotion as we continue to read from this lovely wee book, Bright Evening Star by Madeleine L'Engle. The way to Iona, our first major stop, led across the long dark island of Mull. Why do I call it dark? It was a grey day, not quite rainy, not quite foggy, but with low clouds making it seem later than it was. The road was the narrowest yet, a single-lane road so narrow that two cars coming from different directions could not pass each other. So every few yards there was a pullover, a half moon of space, so that one car could pull over and the other pass. We drove along, all three of us, feeling a peaceful quiet, where we could relax and enjoy our adventure and the stark beauty of the land around us without needing to talk. After a while we realized that there was a tourist bus on our heels, tailgating us rather unpleasantly, pushing, obviously wanting to get by. We were going at what was a reasonable speed for the road, and there was another car in front of us. It was Lucy's turn to drive, and when she saw a pullover to the right, she turned off the road so that the bus driver could get by. In an instant he had slammed into the car in front of us with a great shattering of the rear window, but amazingly little damage. It should have been a bad accident, but other than broken glass, the car in front of us seemed unharmed. Doors were flung open. Suddenly the bus driver's dark and angry face was thrust in Lucy's window, and he was shouting at her, blaming her for the accident, telling her that she should have taken a left-hand pullover, not a right one. On that tiny road it seemed that any pullover which would allow another vehicle to get by was the one to take. But the bus driver kept up his angry accusations. We realized that in his rage, the bus driver was willing to blame anyone and everyone but himself. And the fact that our car was not part of the accident seemed to increase his fury. His face was black with rage. "It's your fault, my girl. You caused it." Barbara, the diplomat, got out and began talking with the passengers on the bus. They were a group from the States en route to Iona, and Barbara actually knew several of them. They were very willing to say that the bus driver had been going too fast, that he had already driven a cyclist off the road, that he'd been tailgating our little car. They were willing to sign a statement that he had been driving recklessly and unsafely. The tour group said that they had hardly felt the bump of the accident. It was very strange. What should have been a terrible accident involving our car, which was not touched, turned out to be amazingly minor. I was feeling very shaken, but not physically. Before I had left for this trip, I had an uncomfortable sense of foreboding. I do not have these dark feelings often, and I have learned that they are not to be taken lightly, nor can I try to avoid them. I do not think that they are what is called provision. They are not forecasting a predetermined future. When I had this same sense of foreboding when my husband and I were in China, the cancer that was to kill Hugh was already in his body. I was not concerned about something that was not there or that had not already happened. I'm not sure what I was picking up on before leaving home. Certainly there is evil in the world, and travelling in a strange country opens us up to unexpected dangers. I had not told my travelling companions my concerns. Talking about them would have served no good purpose, and might even have opened up more darkness. We sat there in our car and waited for a replacement tourist bus, for the angry bus driver had damaged his own bus. Oil was leaking onto the road. People chatted. Barbara soothed, but there was no soothing the bus driver, who wanted the world to know that the accident was our fault, not his. His rage was like an ugly rain falling on all of us. When the new bus came, we said goodbye to the people whose window had been smashed, and they set off to find a garage. The bus rumbled down the road. Lucy started the car, and we finally took off once more. In a low voice, I said that I felt that we had been spared from a fearful danger by some wonderful grace, and neither Lucy nor Bauer laughed at me. They agreed that there was something very strange about the accident, that it should have been far worse than it was, and that our car should have been involved. And the sense of foreboding left me. It did not return. On that narrow road in Mull, we had been at a cross point of darkness and light, and the angels of light were there. This is not an explanation, but it is what I felt. As we drove towards the end of the island, we tried to pray for the bus driver, our words fumbling but earnest. We did not want to pick up on the anger of the bus driver and let it get into us, which would have been very easy. We tried to pray for a light of love which would take away his dark. He was, we agreed, trapped in some kind of evil, and we asked God to free him and to free us. We got to the end of Mull and parked the car and took out our bags for the ferry trip to Iona. It was good to be on the water and to feel the fresh sea breeze. Once we landed, we had a struggle to get our bags up the hill. We piled them into a waiting wheelbarrow, but it did not move easily, and the way was steep. Finally, we were helped by a kindly Scotsman and got to our hotel, where we had simple, cell-like rooms, which were full of peace and quiet. In the long twilight, we wandered around and finally sat on the low remaining walls of a ruined convent to say our evening prayers. We were not sure exactly in which century the convent had been burned, the nuns raped, and everything demolished. This horror had not been done by some alien enemy invader, but by other Christians. It was horrifying to us that whoever was in power, Protestant or Catholic, felt that the demand to kill, literally murder the other, was the will of God. We're still doing it, though perhaps in different ways. This convent was so ancient that all feelings of horror were dissipated by the healing of time, replaced by a sense of acceptance and peace and God's healing. We said our night prayers and talked a little more about the afternoon's accident, again saying that we had been spared by a generous grace that transformed anger into compassion. Jesus never stayed in anger, but moved into a tender compassion for those who wronged him. As he grew in years from childhood to maturity, from the bright 12-year-old who awed the elders in the temple to the mature young man who returned to give his message of love, his understanding grew too. His vision moved from one of exclusivity to one of inclusivity. What would he have thought of those who raped and murdered the nuns in this old convent in his name? The Christians who murdered Orthodox Christians. Not long ago I heard a very loving woman refer to someone as not being Christian, and then drew in her breath to stop herself. It was old Protestant training resurfacing. The person she was referring to was Catholic. Jesus refused to wipe out. Even for the Romans, the enemy, the conqueror, he showed no hate. He did not hate those who were not Jewish, and when his own people turned against him, he did not hate them, he forgave them. Oh yes, on occasion his temper flared. He let the scribes and the Pharisees know what he thought of them. But the anger never stayed. Compassion did. When that bus driver was pouring blame on Lucy, surely he felt self-righteous. Wasn't he, in his accusations, participating in terrorism? Why do we need to feel virtuous? When I feel self-righteous, am I in the mode that can produce terrorism? Perhaps we have more compassion, more objectivity in story than when we think we have the facts. Thank you for joining me today in our Lenten devotion. I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow as we continue our story, Bright Evening Star. So take care, stay safe, and God bless. Goodbye now.